Okay, cool. Thanks for foregoing the Mother Duck talk to come and hang out with me instead. I appreciate it. I am so excited to be at Coalesce. I'm even more excited to be able to bend all of your ears with one of my favorite topics in the world, which is pedagogy. So if we have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, hi, my name is Faith, and my most recent role was as a data analyst at Parsyl. And if you're not familiar with Parsyl, I'm not surprised, it's really niche. So Parsyl provides data-driven risk management and insurance for the perishable goods supply chain. So overall, Parsyl's goal is to help shippers of these perishable goods lose less of their precious cargo as it journeys from harvest to grocery store. So this work is done primarily through the analysis of time temperature data and its surrounding context information. So basically, if you're the type of person who is shipping things that can go bad because they're too hot or too cold, then you're probably an interested customer of Parsyl. And these perishable goods can run the gamut from anything like blueberries to swordfish to even COVID vaccines, which was a huge part of our work during the peak of the pandemic. So as you might imagine, data is really, really central to working at Parsyl. And when I was working there, I was actually our first analyst hire. And part of my job was to build our data stack from the ground up together with our fantastic data engineer. That work was really, really fun. And throughout the process of it, I ended up thinking a lot about data literacy and about helping your business stakeholders understand data better. I also think about this a lot because in a former life, I was a teacher. And I spent a lot of time teaching people of all different ages, lots of different things, and helping people understand stuff and understanding how people understand stuff is really core to my professional identity. So let me tell you a couple of stories. All right, picture this. I am a few months into my job at Parsyl. This is actually my first analyst position. And I'm really familiar with our data stack. I helped to build it, after all. And I know that there's a lot of ways to assess the performance of perishable goods as they move from harvest to grocery store. And I receive a request from a stakeholder sliding into my DMs and saying, hey, Faith, what data do we have on blueberries? And when I tell you I had no idea what this man actually wanted. And at the time, I really didn't know that this was a really common story for analytics practitioners in particular. And I didn't know that these vague and imprecise asks from business stakeholders can make it just really hard to understand what success criteria are and to understand what the real insights needed is. So that's story number one. Story number two. Oh, God, I ruined my own joke. Oh, man. OK, well, guys, I couldn't select star from blueberries. So sad, so sad. OK. Oh, man. All right, so a different time, I had a stakeholder reach out to me, and they noticed that there were more overheating events for a certain type of shipment in August than there were in July. And so they reached out to me to say, hey, Faith, could I reasonably tell the shipper of these perishable goods to avoid shipping in August as much as possible to lower the risk of these overheating events and increase the quality of their shipments? And I said, no, you can't do that. And that's because there were a lot of other factors besides just time of year that might have explained this jump in overheating events. So the perishable goods shipping world, there's so much context data, and it's very hard to figure out what is actually causing more overheating events with perishable goods. So it's just complicated. And in this whole process, we talked through these other potential factors, and we figured it out, right? Like, we talked it out. We're humans. We know how to use our words. But this just took a lot of back and forth and a lot of explaining, and there was so much confusion. And with both of these times, I just was left wondering if maybe there was a better way. So let's think about what these stories have in common. Both of them display a lack of data understanding from my stakeholders. They're asking weird questions. Both of them involve inaccurate assumptions, both on the part of my stakeholders making assumptions about the data that we have, and me making assumptions about what they really understand. This is really frustrating. Both of these stories involve a lot of frustration and a lot of back and forth. And this is just a lot of time consumed. And I think all of us get frustrated with time consumed asking and answering the same questions over and over. OK, so what can we do about it? Well, Over the course of my time at Parsyl, I've come to believe that if your business stakeholders understood your data a little bit better, they might ask better questions and participate more fully in their own projects. But Faith, you ask, why, how can we get our business stakeholders to understand the data better? I think that you should think like a teacher. So teachers think a lot about how people learn and how best to communicate information. And the study of these concepts is called pedagogy. So teachers use pedagogical tools to help improve students' understanding and to understand the different ways that people learn. There's lots of pedagogical tools out there. The one that I'm going to tell you about today is called Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy is really helpful in breaking down the process of understanding new concepts into discrete, manageable steps. You can think of Bloom's taxonomy as giving teachers a common language. This framework breaks down how people learn based upon the complexity of the tasks that they're asked to do. So for the eagle-eyed among you, you might notice here that on the bottom, we have lower order thinking, and we kind of step our way up to higher order thinking, one movement at a time. The ethos here is walking before you can run. Basically, don't expect your stakeholders to ask good questions if they're not even remotely familiar with the data that's in your stack or any of its limitations. Each step up the pyramid here is supposed to represent that transition from lower order to higher order thinking. So if we want our stakeholders to ask better questions, we need to start with the basics. We need to get them some knowledge. We need to help them comprehend it. We need to show them some basic applications of the data, bring them in on our analyses a little more explicitly, synthesize their outside knowledge with your data knowledge, and then they'll be more equipped to evaluate what the hell a good question is versus what a crazy one is. So to understand these stages better, I'm going to walk you through a fictional example of applying Bloom's taxonomy to a data problem. And the hope here is that you, especially if you are on the analytics side of things, I want you to understand that Bloom's taxonomy is probably something you already do on a daily basis, and you might just not realize it. So after that, I'll share 3 examples of how I've applied these principles in my own data work when I was at Parsyl. So let's start with fictional example. I am going to bring you now into my little talk within a talk where we're going to pretend like I'm a sales analyst for a successful fitness wear brand called the Determined Awesome Cycling Group, or DAG for short. Okay, so DAG has a thriving activewear arm, and one of the main things that they sell is matching workout sets. And any resemblance to real matching workout sets is entirely coincidental. So as an enterprising sales analyst, I want to help them sell more of these matching workout sets. So I'm going to start out by gathering some knowledge. I pour through the data, and I figure out that, oh my God, there is a jump in sales of these matching workout sets from December 1st to January 1st. That's step 1. I found some new knowledge about my data set. So what does this knowledge mean? Well, figuring out what my knowledge means is called comprehension. And of course, comprehension is second nature to analysts. We do this all the time. But it's worth thinking about these steps one little piece at a time. Okay, so we have this knowledge. Sales of matching workout sets jump in December. So from the crowd, I'd love a verbal response. Why might sales of matching workout sets jump in December? Thank you. Yes, the holidays and probably New Year's resolutions, right? So that brings us 2 steps up the pyramid already. Next up, we want to ask ourselves, what can we do with this knowledge that sales of matching workout sets jump around the holidays? How can we apply it? Well, something we could do is suggest to the design team that maybe the holidays are a good time to drop new themed matching workout sets because people are already buying more stuff anyways. Maybe they would buy even more if we gave them like a Christmas themed workout set. I would probably buy it. So we could even compare the sales of these new workout sets to the old ones that are perennially available. That's our application step. Cool, now we have approval for our comparative sales project. The holidays roll around, and DAG drops these fresh looks in time for that holiday sales bump. And we compare the performance of these fresh looks to the old ones, and the fresh looks outpace the old ones in terms of sales. So there's our analysis step right there. We are figuring out if the application of our knowledge will lead to the outcomes that we're hoping for. Okay, so now I'm armed with my kick-ass analysis that the new designs dropped around the holidays outpaced the old ones in terms of sales. And now I want to understand why again. But this why is different than the one that I asked in the comprehension step. And this time, I don't want to just use my own knowledge. So I'm going to go hit up my coworker who works in marketing, and I'm going to ask her to help me explain these results. And we decide that these increased sales come from a combination of a human preference for novelty, as well as the impulse to buy more around the holidays. So we put together two sources of knowledge and use them to create a new explanation. That's all synthesis is. Finally, we've nearly traversed the entire pyramid here, and we're ready to present our evaluation to upper management. Our trial run of dropping new sets around the holidays went so well, and we have a solid data-backed argument that dropping these new designs around the holidays is a viable money-making strategy for DAG's activewear arm. The CEO gets on board. This is a permanent initiative, and data work is always this easy, right? Oh, man. So here's what I want you to take away from the DAG activewear example. It's that Bloom's taxonomy is a stepwise process that you, if you're in an analytical function, are probably already doing. And Bloom's taxonomy is simply a way to codify the work that you're very familiar with. So we can apply this to data literacy. So I'll reiterate again here, why would we expect our business stakeholders to be able to evaluate the difference between good questions and weird ones if they don't have any baseline knowledge of the data? We're asking them to jump too high. And why would we expect them to be able to analyze the difference between these good and bad questions if they can't have any comprehension of our data's constraints? So I think that your organization can scope data projects faster and more efficiently if you invest the time in building data literacy one step at a time. You don't even have to go all the way up the pyramid. Just a few steps can help. So I've tried a few methods to implement Bloom's taxonomy at my last job, and we're going to share them with you next. And as a side note, I brought this up to my coworkers at Parsyl that this was what my talk was going to be about, and they were all surprised that I had been using these strategies. So it was on the low, like you don't have to ask for approval. So let's remember that the first three steps of Bloom's taxonomy are knowledge, comprehension, and application. I'm going to start off with giving you some examples of how you can provide opportunities for knowledge building at your organization. These fall into passive knowledge building opportunities and active. And within active opportunities, you have structured and unstructured. Then we'll explore some methods to seek out comprehension from your coworkers. And finally, we'll provide ways to highlight potential applications of your org's data. So let's start with that lowest level of the pyramid, providing opportunities for knowledge building. This falls into the category of passive knowledge building opportunities. So my big spicy Coalesce take for you today is that I think that interesting data tidbits and insights should be served up on a silver platter, and you shouldn't make your coworkers go digging for them. That's not what self-service is. So an important step that we took towards serving our data up on a silver platter for our business stakeholders was cataloging it. So shout out to SelectStar. We use SelectStar, and I welcome your discourse and your slings and arrows, but I think that this is a great way for you to provide passive and well-organized opportunities for knowledge building for your coworkers. Our data catalog also provided us a really observable and user-friendly method to give people reliable information about our data that we baked into our pull request process as well. And we were also able to use usage analytics to make sure that it's not just the data team who's using the data catalog, because as nifty as they are, they're supposed to be for the business stakeholders, right? Okay, so that's our passive knowledge building opportunity. I've got a couple of active examples for you. This is my main method of unstructured knowledge building that I used while I was at Parsyl. I'm not expecting you to be able to see the text on the screen here. The emoji are enough. So we've got the gold medal emoji at the top. So this is the Looker News, by the way. I did this every week while I was at Parsyl. The gold medal emoji is a friendly competition for the top Looker user of the week. And I simply did that by number of queries run, I think. So maybe sometimes I did it in minutes. And this is lovingly called the Look Olympics. Below it, we have the eyes emoji. And the eyes emoji was a percentage of users that were actually querying in the last 30 days. Below the eyes emoji, we have the shipment and the cold face. The shipment and the cold face were a couple of pieces of count data that I actually knew were useful to my stakeholders on an ongoing basis, and they were just interested in seeing it. Underneath that, I've got the fish emoji. The fish emoji was where I got to have a little fun, and I just picked out a piece of data that I thought was interesting. It was random, it did not serve any real purpose, and I just kind of threw it at the wall to see if it would stick. Finally, I also attached a link to the Looker news within Looker, as well as a PDF for any coworkers who didn't have access. So the themes here are that your unstructured knowledge building opportunities should be short, digestible, and consistent. This is not like an executive-ready report at all. It's just some fun data tidbits that I posted every Friday in the Slack. This went pretty well for us. So some weeks I would post the Looker news and get absolutely no response. Other weeks, a non-data person would comment underneath the Looker news, and they would say, hey, you said that there were X amount of shipments arriving this week that we monitored. I thought there were Y amount. So that type of comment is where the real money is, and is exactly the reason why I would do the Looker news. Because in addition to regular exposure to the important metrics in your business, these unstructured knowledge building opportunities also give you a chance to check any inaccurate assumptions that your business stakeholders might be making about the data when the stakes are low. I personally would much rather my coworker reveals an inaccurate assumption about the data during a silly Slack game than in front of a customer. So this is just a really manageable first step to help build the foundation of data literacy at your organization. Okay, well, what about structured knowledge building? Slack games only get you so far. Not everything can be Slack games, sadly. Our data team also provided lunch and learns on a regular basis in service of structured, more long-form knowledge building. And overall, we saw data team lunch and learns as a chance to ask ourselves, what's happening out there in the data world that we feel our business stakeholders need to know about? For us, two recent topics were machine learning and ChatGPT. So ML has obviously been a hot topic for a while now, and it's furthermore a topic that forever online data practitioners are always wringing their hands about because executives love to ask for ML when a case when statement would do. So we've been there, like, oh my God, have we been there? One of our brilliant data scientists gave a ML 101 lunch and learn, and that included, first of all, this fabulous meme, which if you can't read it, it says, learning is so boring unless it's gossip. Teachers should just start every lecture like, oh my God, did you hear about machine learning? So the topics that we covered in this lunch and learn are also listed on the screen here, but they were the types of problems that machine learning is good at solving, the types of problems it's bad at solving, the benefits and risks of ML. That's when we brought up the Zillow ML fiasco from a while back, and also why machine learning requires a lot of data. So the point was to have our coworkers walk away understanding these 4 topics and these 4 topics only. We're not expecting them to become experts. This is just the baseline knowledge that we decided was important for them to know about. Our data scientist who led the session kept his expectations reasonable but rigorous. And our coworkers were really engaged with the presentation, and it was very satisfying to see them walk away having more productive conversations about machine learning instead of talking about it like it's a black magic silver bullet solution to any problem. Our other most recent lunch and learn was on ChatGPT, and it was led by our other brilliant data scientist. So at the time, ChatGPT was at the peak of its popularity, and it's of course very tightly tied to the data world. It's worth noting here that at the time, because of the security and hallucination risk, ChatGPT wasn't something we used at Parsyl beyond having it be essentially a glorified search engine. But curiosity was really high around this topic, because do we remember when all CNN could talk about was ChatGPT? Like, this was when we held this lunch and learn. The topics that we covered were how ChatGPT actually works, examples of how people interact with it, tips for how to interact with it, and what the security and hallucination risks are. So, to those of us who are so far into data hype cycles that we want to vomit if we ever hear the words generative AI or chatbot again, these topics might seem a little bit milquetoast to you. But at the time, a lot of our stakeholders had only ever heard the name ChatGPT, and they just didn't know what it was or how it worked. And our data scientists had the chance to arm them with really important literacy around a topic that's deeply intertwined with the data world, even though it wasn't specifically about our data. She also had the opportunity to help them build intuition and, again, literacy around data in general, hoping that it would transfer over to interaction with our data. And after this lunch and learn, it was very gratifying to see the well-rounded conversations that happened afterwards and the specific guidance that got issued for how Parsyl people should and should not interact with ChatGPT. So we've established that unstructured knowledge building lets you build a foundation and assess where people are at. Structured knowledge building lets you invest more time in developing these core data skills for your stakeholders. It also lets you have more opportunities for extended discussion. And finally, structured knowledge building lets you have the time to give your stakeholders a chance to develop intuition and appropriate skepticism around data tools, as well as trust in the ones that exist at your company. Okay, that's knowledge building. Let's move on to comprehension. Oh man, a lot of data scoping work reminds me of Ryan Gosling in The Notebook, but the difference is that I am not allowed to yell, "What do you want?" at my stakeholders. So what if we didn't only have "what do you want" conversations before a project began? What if instead we were able to have those types of conversations on an ongoing basis? And what if these conversations helped us figure out the level of comprehension that our stakeholders have of the data and could help us encourage better comprehension of the data at the same time? So let's move one more step up the pyramid here. When I was in teacher world, comprehension was most frequently assessed through quizzes. And in corporate America, I noticed the same thing, but it's surveys. So I think surveys are useful, but they should be used for specific feedback and not for assessing comprehension. So instead of using surveys to figure out what comprehension your business stakeholders have of your data, I recommend coffee and comprehension interviews. So I did this quite a few times. One summer, I interviewed members of sales, ops, and marketing, and I called these my data goblin interviews. And I was not scoping any particular project at all. I just wanted to understand how did they interact with the data, what did they understand about it, and in an ideal world, how could the data team support their work? This was a win-win situation. They got a coffee break out of it, and I got a chance to assess their comprehension and understanding of our data in a lower stakes environment than when we're really trying to gather project requirements and we're on a 2-week schedule. So this approach just let me build a general understanding of where they were with our data and encourage their better comprehension of it and my comprehension of where they were at with it. So you can try some of the sample questions listed on the slide here if you're going to go home and try a coffee and comprehension interview yourself. The third and final step we'll take up the pyramid today is to applications. I'm going to tell you one last story. So something Parsyl is pretty well known for is monitoring the entire Senegalese vaccine supply chain. And in Senegal, they store their vaccines in a very complex hierarchical system of regions, districts, and facilities. Within a region, you could have hundreds, even thousands of refrigerators that actually store the vaccines. On-the-ground health workers can have a hard time figuring out where the most problematic fridges are and which ones need to be prioritized for replacement. One of my business stakeholders who manages this on-the-ground relationship came to me and displayed a gorgeous understanding of the data and of its constraints. And he came to me and said, "Hey, can you please figure out a way to make it easier for these on-the-ground health workers to figure out where the most problematic fridges are?" And he actually understood our data well enough to present me with a really easy application. All I had to do was a slick little bit of data modeling, and they now have an alert that sends them a notification when any one refrigerator is responsible for more than 75% of the overheating events in that particular region. The math really wasn't hard. It was a gorgeously easy problem because he had knowledge and comprehension of the data, and he could ask me for the application. Isn't that the dream? So think about it. Do you have a big win like this for data at your company? This is an awesome topic to expand upon in those coffee and comprehension or data goblin interviews that we just discussed. If you bring in ideas, it might spark ideas for other applications from your coworkers. So I would bring in stuff like those bad fridges that I mentioned, but I would also just make stuff up and go to my salespeople and ask, "Hey, if I could get the data from LinkedIn that lets you know the time of day that you would get the most responses from your cold outreach prospects, would that change how you did your work at all?" And she told me, no, it wouldn't change anything. But the point was less that my idea worked and more that I modeled what I wanted to see and gave her a chance to play it back to me. This is also a teaching strategy where you just walk the road with them and tell them what you want to see and give them a chance to play it back. Okay, oh my God, a lot of information. What are you supposed to walk out if you're remembering? I don't need you to remember everything, not even my sick memes. But what I do want you to take home with you are ideas for you to try to improve data literacy at your organization. Try out an unstructured knowledge building activity. Slack games get you further than you think they will. Ask yourself, what do your business users need to know about what's happening in the data world? And give them a lunch and learn about it. They'll be interested, I promise. Schedule a coffee and comprehension interview with one of your coworkers and try to encourage better understanding. And finally, give some thought to potential applications of your business's data to bring up in these interviews. And lastly, remember that this is a long-term process. Data literacy can only bloom through small steps, so stay persistent and stay patient. Thanks for having me. Awesome, well, I finished right at 25, so if you have questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, you get 5 minutes back. Cool, yeah, you can go, it's fine, yeah.
What's your thoughts on documenting knowledge?
Yeah, so we made sure to bake this into our pull request process. So for any Looker asset in particular, we made it part of the pull request process where your work doesn't get approved unless you have your FAQ in SelectStar and your technical reviewer has to check off the FAQ that's in SelectStar. It's similar with DBT, although it's definitely easier to enforce in DBT simply because you can automate pull request templates. And if you don't have a description of every single column, your shit doesn't get merged. Yeah. Just gotta crack the whip sometimes, yeah. So, cool.
With your Slack games, I guess I have two questions. Sure. Yeah, so with your Slack games that you do, there's two questions. One, what channel do you post it? Is it like an all-company one or a data-specific channel? And then two, are you doing it like an at here, or are you trying to kind of force it, or is it just more passive and hopefully they'll see it?
Yeah, so we have a data channel, and I would post it in that one. This was a way to get more people to come into the data channel, because if they won the Look Olympics, they would get tagged and then added to the channel. And then the only people that get tagged in the Look Olympics are the ones, or in the Looker News, are the ones that win the Look Olympics that week. So I didn't do an at here, and that like might be why some weeks it flopped, but I was trying to do the carrot approach of improving data literacy rather than too much smacking them in the face with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes?
How do you handle data literacy with people that need to be data literate and don't want to engage?
Yeah, so people that need to be data literate but don't want to engage. This is complicated. So my biggest success story with data literacy was with the underwriters at Parsyl. Part of this is a good combination of the carrot and the stick, where in their work, they're required to incorporate X amount of data insights into every policy that they write. So they're motivated by like partly their KPIs, or else they won't be meeting their goals by the end of the year. And so I felt it was important for me to provide the stick side of it, or sorry, for me to provide the carrot, geez. Woof! Oh my God. So I felt it was important for me to provide the carrot and to make the process fun for them, because underwriters are so busy. So part of that was out of my control, frankly. Like, I couldn't provide the stick. I just tried to make it as fun as I could. And I think people respond to positive enforcement better than we'll give them credit for, you know? So especially if they don't want to, sometimes that's just like a really long game of like, oh my God, I noticed like Brian from accounting is like really engaging in Looker this week. Hell yeah, Brian, you get this emoji. And like the first time he's probably gonna think it's silly, but several times after, like they caught on and they really liked the competition of it all. So I think it's like about what's your amount of power that you have. And if it's not a lot, you go the carrot. And if you have more power, maybe it's bake-inable to the KPI and goal setting process. Yeah, that's just my opinion though. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, yeah.
I'm curious a little bit more about some differentiation across different people.
Yeah.
Were the PMs who want to be very data literate, or designers who maybe just want to know enough? So what does that look like across the different skills?
Yeah, so when I was spearheading the data catalog adoption process, I actually surveyed all of our PMs because I was really hoping that they would get involved with the data catalog as well. And half of them were like, this is great, can't wait to have more opportunities to dig into the data. The other half were like, if you make me log into another tool, like I'm gonna kill you. And so like for them, I did my best to incentivize them to get into SelectStar as often as possible. So that was things like, if you're asking me the definition of a term or like what a dashboard is for, I'm gonna hit you with the SelectStar link every time. And I will not be answering the question for you, like I'm gonna force you to get in there to read it. And that's kind of the best I can do as far as differentiating between PMs who wanna be involved and ones who don't. And they pick up on that eventually, like, but it's not an easy solution for sure. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Sweet, that's time. Thanks for coming, folks.